Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angel, and today I'm going to be sharing some Victorian inspired ornaments that I'll be using to decorate my feather trees. I wanted to make some frame ornaments for my feather tree, and these little gold plastic frames that I got from the thrift store are going to be perfect and lightweight for the feather tree. You can also grab these at pretty much any craft store, but I'm also wanting to use these little brass corner pieces that I got from Amazon, and I'm just going to add these to the top and the bottom to give this a more vintage Victorian look. Once I have those corner pieces added to the top and the bottom of the frames, then I'm going to go over all three of these frames with some of my European gold rub and buff just to make them match the corner pieces a little better and tone down that gold. So for the inside of these frames, I'm going to be using some of this Damask scrapbook paper that I got from Amazon, and I'm just going to add it to some of this chipboard that I also got off of Amazon just to make this a little sturdier and thicker. So I'm just using a glue stick to add this paper to that chipboard, and then I'll just cut off the excess once I've glued this down. Then I'm just going to use each of those frames, and on the back side of that scrapbook paper and chipboard, I'll just kind of trace around the inside of those frames. They have a little lip, so I was able to make these fit pretty perfectly inside those frames. Then to embellish these frames a little further, I'm actually going to use some of this Chanel Frayed ribbon that I also got from Amazon, and it is a very thin and kind of see-through, so each of the pieces that I cut down for the frame, I'm actually going to fold them over onto itself 3 times. I'm adding a little dab of hot glue on each of these just to keep them folded over and keep them from coming undone. Now I made sure to keep these a little longer than my frame is wide because, as you can see here, I kind of want to fold over the center over the end parts of it. If it makes sense, you'll be able to see right here what I'm talking about. I just kind of glued each end to the inside of the frame where I wanted it, and then once I had those ends glued down, I have a lot of excess fabric in the center, so I'm able to make a little fold and then hot glue those over top of the edges. Hopefully that makes sense. I did slow down the video and not speed it up right here just so you could see what I was talking about. I wanted it to kind of look like a bow sort of in the center of this, so that's why I am folding over those edges. But I'm just going to end up doing this to all 3 of the frames the same exact way. Then on the center of each of these ribbons, I wanted to add a little Christmas stamp with some Christmas sayings on there. And these stamps are from Amazon, and they just have little Christmas sayings on them. So once I finish stamping each of these, then I'll just add some ribbon. It definitely would not be a Victorian Christmas tree without some candles, so I decided to make some for my feather trees just using some clothespins. I bought a big box of them off of Amazon. It was just cheaper that way, and I'm just going to use about 10 of these and take my hot glue gun to start and make little drippy wax all over my clothespins. I am kind of making sure that I get a lot of hot glue in that little indentation at the top here, just so that it'll look more like a real candle. Once all of my hot glue is dry, then I'm going to go in with some white chalk paint and just paint over all of these clothespins. Then to make the flames for the candles, I'm actually going to use some of these jumbo craft sticks, and I'm just going to cut each end of the craft stick to make those little flames. After I cut all of these, then I'm just using a sandpaper sheet and sanding off any rough edges. I mixed up a dark orange color paint, and I'm gonna paint all of my little flames using this color, doing the front and back side. Then I'm gonna dry brush a really light yellow color over these flames, but I'm leaving that little center portion that orange color. Then once everything was dry, I'm going to take this little poker tool thing that I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm just making a hole down in the center of the clothespin, and then using some floral wire, I'm going to hot glue the floral wire to the back of the flame and then glue that little floral wire down into the hole that I made. And this just makes that flame extra secure onto the candle. Once I finish putting everything together, then I'm going to go back in with a little more hot glue and kind of drip it down from the flame down onto the candle so that it looks like one piece. Then to finish these off, I'm just going back in with a little more white chalk paint and going over those new wax lines. For this ornament, I'm going to grab some chipboard and then just some scrapbook paper that I liked. This one wasn't a Christmassy scrapbook paper. It just had little red roses on it. But I'm going to glue this down to the chipboard just to make it a little thicker and more substantial. Then I just traced out this little ballerina from my computer and cut that down, and I'm going to use this as a template to make all my little ballerina ornaments. So as you can see, I just traced this on the back of the chipboard, and then I'm going to cut all of those out. Dressing up little paper dolls was very popular in the Victorian era, so I'm grabbing some of these little cupcake liners and I'm actually going to make the skirts for these ballerinas. I'm going to be using 2 of these cupcake liners per ballerina. For the first one, I'm just folding that over in half, and then I'm going to line this up with her waistline and fold over the side pieces to the back of her. Once I had that folded over and lined up, then I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue to the back side of this to hold the cupcake liners. For the second cupcake liner, I'm actually going to fold it a little smaller than halfway, and then I'll cut off that excess part on the bottom. Then I'm going to layer this right on top of the first one and line it up with her waistline again, and then glue it to the back side. And once I have that second layer glued down, then I'm going to grab that piece that I cut off from this piece, and I'm going to add that right to the top to make the third layer. Then I just continued doing the same thing for the rest of my ballerinas. To finish them off, I just added some velvet ribbon to their waistlines and then added a little hanger. For this ornament, we're going to make some spun cotton icicles. So I grabbed some cotton balls and some more of that Dollar Tree floral wire. And then to make this floral wire just a little sturdier, I'm going to fold it over onto itself and twist 2 pieces together. Once I had those made, then I'm going to start grabbing my cotton balls, and you're kind of going to want to start pulling these apart, but be very careful not to tear them, especially if you have the Dollar Tree cotton balls. They're a little smaller and a little harder to pull apart. So just do it slowly and be careful not to tear these. But as you're pulling these apart, you want to pull them long ways and make them as long as possible. And as you saw right there, I mixed up just a little bit of glue and water, and then here I'm just prepping that floral wire by making a hook at the top of it before dipping my cotton ball into that glue and water mixture. You'll definitely want to try to wring this out as best as possible, but once you have that glue and water mixture on your cotton ball, you're going to take it and wrap it around your piece of wire. And as you can see here when I'm wrapping it, the longer you have your piece of cotton ball, then the longer your icicle will be. So just continue wrapping your cotton ball all the way around till you get to the bottom. And once you are finished, then you can kind of squish this together onto that wire. Now, once I got to the second one, I actually found it easier to just get that glue and water mixture on my fingers and kind of just squeeze it onto the cotton ball so that way it wasn't overly saturated and making a big mess. But just continue making your icicles until you've made however many you want to make. And then before you set these aside to let them dry, if you wanted to, you could add some glitter to these. I left mine plain and just set them aside and let them dry overnight. Once they were all dry the next day, then I just cut off the excess wire that was hanging from the bottom. One of the most popular Victorian ornaments were paper fans, so I'm grabbing some of this smaller scrapbook paper that I got from Amazon, and it just has different designs on it in different colors, and I just picked out a few, grabbed 3 pages of each, and then I'm going to fold each of these pages down like a fan. These sheets are around 3 by 5, so they were perfect for my feather tree. Now, since these weren't as wide as I would have liked, that's why I ended up folding down 3 pages of each design so that I could glue all 3 of those pages together to make my fans a little wider. Then once I had all 3 of my pages glued together, I'm just going to refold this to make it nice and neat, pinch the bottom of it, and then I'll pull down each side to make my fan shape. Now, I'm fairly certain that Victorians didn't have staplers, but for this ornament, I am going to use my stapler to keep my fans together at the bottom. Then to cover the staples and add a little bit of pretty detail to these fans, I'm just adding some velvet ribbon to the bottom of these using some hot glue, and then I'll just cut off the excess in the back of these. Then I'm going to use that same velvet ribbon and make little bows to put on the front side of these. Then for the little hangers for these, I'm actually going to be using this pearl strand that I got from Amazon, and I'm just going to cut that down and glue it to the back side of my fans to use as the little hangers. If you watched last week's video of the ornaments for my large tree, you saw that I made some frames for that tree. I also wanted to make some little mini ones for my feather tree. So I'm just using some of my Amazon molds and air dry clay and making a bunch of these tiny little frames. Once I had all the frames made, then I set them aside and let them dry overnight. Instead of silhouettes for these frames, I actually had a bunch of photos printed off at Walgreens in a wallet size. Some of these are actually on my blog. I'll make sure I link it below. Nutcracker photos or Scrooge from A Christmas Carol photos. And then the little Santa Claus photos that I have here are actually from the Graphics Fairy website. and I just had these printed off. I cut them down to fit all my frames, but before I put them in, I did decide to spray paint all of my frames gold, and then I'm going back over them with some European gold rub and buff just to age them up and make them look a little older. Then I'm just using some gel super glue to glue all of my photos to the backs of the frames. Then to cover these up and just make them look a little neater, I'm adding some velvet paper to the back side of them. Not only were paper dolls really popular in the Victorian era, but little wood or stick dolls were also popular ornaments. So I'm again using some clothespins, and then I also have these little candle cups that I got from Hobby Lobby. And since the Nutcracker was a very popular story in the Victorian era, I am going to be making some little Nutcracker dolls. So I'm also going to be using these tiny little dowels that I got from Dollar Tree, and I cut those down to make little arms for all of my Nutcrackers. Once I had all their little arms glued to their bodies, then I'm going to go over all of these and give them a base coat of 1 coat of white chalk paint. And if you haven't guessed yet, I'm going to use those little candle cups as the Nutcracker hats. So I'm going over those with a coat of black chalk paint. Now, once the Nutcrackers were dry, then it was time to really go in and do a few details on these. I started by painting all of their little boots with some black chalk paint, and I just used a really stiff brush to kind of get a straight line, or as straight as it could be in my case, but I just continued to do all of their boots to start with. Then I decided to give 2 of my Nutcrackers red jackets. So here I'm going in with my red, and I'm kind of trying to make their jacket look a little V'd, so it looks like they have a shirt underneath there, but it didn't quite work out too much. It was a little bit difficult to do this, so I do end up doing the other Nutcrackers a little different. I actually give them a full jacket instead of trying to do the little V-neck on their jacket, just because it was a little easier. So for those other 2, I'm just using some antique gold metallic paint, and this is the reason why I actually did that base coat of white chalk paint on these first, because using acrylic or the metallic paint, it just makes it so much easier to get good coverage. And once I had their jackets finished, then I just used one of my black paint markers, and I'm gonna make all of their little belts. Then I went in with a fine tip white marker and did the center pieces of their belts. And for the Nutcrackers with the red jackets, I'm using a gold metallic paint pen and going around the rim of their boots. I also used that same gold paint pen to do the little buttons and little loops on his jacket. And then for the ones with the gold jacket, I actually just ended up using that same gold paint and a really tiny paintbrush to do the little tops of his boots. Then to finish these off, I needed to add their little hats, but before I add the hats to them, I'm going to put some of this black velvet ribbon down in the hole of these candle cups, tie a knot, and then pull it up into the candle cup. Then I'll just loop this over and hot glue it together to make little hangers. And finally, to secure their hats, I'm just using some gel super glue. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.